Why do I own Fancy Skulls? Well, I'm pretty sure that I got it in some Humble Bundle. I see it included in bundles all the time. Anyways, what kind of game is Fancy Skulls? Well, basically it's like a first-person shooter version of The Binding of Isaac, and I actually think that sounds pretty neat. I like The Binding of Isaac well enough, but it's not really my favorite type of game. My preference in game genres are, obviously, first-person shooters, so when I looked in my Steam inventory and saw Fancy Skulls and wondered what the hell it was and found out, I was sort of interested. But let's cut to the chase and ask the question, is the game any good? Well, yeah, I mean it is, but there's not a whole lot of it, and before I get any further, I'm just going to say that the game may end up as abandonware. I mean, sure, you can still get it through the Humble Bundle, Steam, and even the developer's website, but the creator had basically jumped ship to another project last year called Box Life, and that was released earlier this year. The developer has stated in emails that I've sent, as well as on the Steam forums, that there will be updates coming soon, possibly in May. With that being said, I'd love to see a finished game because what I played seemed very nice, but this is the problem with early access in Steam's greenlight systems. Games just have the tendency to die and be left to rot on the Steam store. The frequently asked questions about early access even warns people that developers might not be able to complete their games. You know, we give shit to EA and their developers about releasing unfinished products as well as Ubisoft and, their crappy games. But I've seen people defend, smaller developers intensely, saying that they don't deserve the flack they get because they aren't a big developer. While there are certain technical aspects that I might be able to dismiss on a smaller team of developers or with a single developer, straight up abandoning your game without saying anything isn't really one of them. As well, I understand that real life shit could get in the way of you being able to finish your game. It happens to everyone. But that seems to be the problem nowadays, is that it happens all the time. And this wouldn't be a big deal for me if the game was free, but I already paid money for it. I mean, a lot of these games I got in Humble Bundle and they weren't the main reason I got it, so I didn't pay a whole lot, but, someone paid the full price for this game. Anyways, we got all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the different aspects that this game has to offer. As you can see, the art style is very minimalistic. The textures and geometry shown throughout the world are very simple. Enemies and weapons also reflect that. The game isn't a technical marvel in terms of graphics, but the creepy minimalist vibe that the game oozes is really nice, and I have to say that I do like it. There's not really much to say about the graphics, really. It's all very simple, easy on the eyes, and it's a very easy game to run. So if you have a toaster, then you should be fine if you intend to play this game. The audio for the game is nice, if not scarce. I feel that the scarcity between rooms adds a sense of creepiness to the game. When the game isn't mostly being quiet, the sounds that do play are okay, like I said. Gun sounds and enemies are good, but also forgettable. There's not really a whole lot to say about this. Like I said, it is pretty scarce, so can't really go into much detail on that. The gameplay itself is, I feel, what would be the most attractive aspect to the game that would draw people in. Like I stated earlier, it's basically The Binding of Isaac in FPS form. You start off with a basic weapon and travel from procedurally generated room to procedurally generated room, taking out enemies, collecting new items, weapons, and currency to use to your advantage to proceed even further throughout the game. It's not really a new or original concept now, but it's one that seems to keep people sucked in. Unfortunately for Fancy Skulls, there's not enough content or enough of a clear goal to really keep you coming back for more, at least for me. Compare this to either The Binding of Isaac or the newly released Enter the Gungeon, and you'll notice just how barren and incomplete Fancy Skulls is. Those of you who might say, "But they're different games, one is in first person then the others are top down." And to that I would say, fuck you, and take a look at Eldritch instead. Eldritch is another first-person dungeon-crawling roguelike with a low-poly art style, except that Eldritch has a lot more content, replayability, and a defined end goal to offer. If anyone asks which I would recommend, Eldritch or Fancy Skulls, I would definitely recommend Eldritch, as it offers exactly what I said. But even so, I wouldn't call Fancy Skulls a bad game, just one that's uninspired and devoid of a lot of content. But that's what you get when you buy into early access, I suppose. Speaking of the little stuff that it has, there's the basic shooting, which isn't anything that really needs explanation. You just point and click. There's different power-ups and collectibles that will help you along the way. A few different weapons with varying degrees of usefulness. different challenge rooms scattered throughout each level, which you must achieve 3 crowns, which basically means that you have to beat the room quickly, accurately, and without taking damage, or else you'll be instantly killed. I think that's a nice little touch, but, you know. Anyways, Fancy Skulls needs a lot more. It needs more weapons, it needs more enemy variety, it needs more level variety, it needs more, and more. It might take a while to get all of this, but it definitely needs it if it wants to stand alongside larger, more popular dungeon crawling roguelikes. I could go into detail on how or what it needs, but I'm gonna leave that to the developer, and maybe I'll make some suggestions in the Steam forum someday as the game progresses. Who knows? The next thing I'm gonna talk about is my favorite thing to talk about in video games. The story! Yay! There really is none. Anyways, the next thing I want to talk about is, fine. I've made it apparent in some of my recent videos that I don't really care about story in video games, and I still really don't, but I feel that if the developer wants to make this game somewhat successful, they should add some sort of story, even if it's simple. Especially if it's simple. We don't need a grandiose backstory for a game like this, but something to get the average player interested and something to keep them moving towards a clear and concise goal would do wonders for this game. At the moment, you're basically just some guy stuck in an art museum shooting at the security guards. Hey, maybe this game does have a story. Killing security guards in a museum? This game's like Payday, but with less DLC. Oh. So, yeah, there's not really much to talk about in this game. And really, there's not a whole lot there to begin with, so that's why I padded out the video with my ranting about early access. But still, it's a decent game that can run on a toaster, and it might have some potential to be something better than it currently is. I hope that we see these updates here soon, and whenever the game sees a full release in 2018, I might actually do a full-fledged review on it. Anyways, thank you for watching, if you actually did.